Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Paul D'Ambrosio, and I teach Chinese philosophy at East China Normal University, where the四海为学Collaborative Learning Project is based. I want to welcome you to our fifth event of the 2025-2026 academic year and our 63rd event since 2022. Today we are hosting a book discussion of Professor Wang Youru's The Ethical Dimension of Forgetfulness, engaging the Taoist Zhuangzi in studies of cultivated forgetting. We have a really impressive lineup of really great experts to discuss this book. We have Professor Ellen Zhang from the University of Macau, Professor Yuan from Tsinghua University, and Dr. Luyao from Peking University. Our chair today is Nicolò Brescia from East China Normal University. It has become a tradition here at 四海为学 to give younger scholars a chance to be part of high-profile academic events by inviting them to take part as chairs or discussants. So if there are any younger scholars in the audience who wish to be part of future events, please email me. This event will be 2 hours total, ending promptly at 11 p.m. Beijing time. Before getting things started and handing them over to Nicolò, I want to say a few things about the 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Academic Forum. The 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project hopes to distinguish itself from some of the less productive conventional practices in contemporary academia. As posted on our website, we are not interested in male peacocks, in jerks, or in any form of egoism or self-promotion. We hope to curb all types of aggressive and "look at me, I'm smarter than you," or "don't I know so much," and similar attitudes sometimes found in academic exchanges. We might even go so far as to say that we hope to be somewhat of a counterbalance for the negative attitudes often found in so-called blind reviews. While there is a time and a place for anonymity, or at least the appearance of anonymity, communication in academia should have just as much time and place for speaking to one another in more congenial and community-forming settings. The neologism 四海为学, which was created by Rowan Wang, is a play on 四海为家, and we hope to keep this idea of 四海为家at the foreground of all of our events. The 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project seeks to accomplish these shifts in orientation during academic exchange by encouraging productive communication, humble discussions, real questions, and responses that are open and honest. We hope to foster environments where people truly learn from and with one another. Before introducing our chair, I want to once again thank all of the professors for being here with us today. Our chair is Nicolò Brescia. He is a first-year PhD student in the Department of Philosophy at East China Normal University. He focuses on pre-Qin Chinese philosophy and on Song Dynasty Confucianism, with a particular interest in phenomenology and aesthetics. Since his BA years in fine arts, he's also been researching Chinese painting and film. Thank you for hosting today, Nicolò. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the opportunity. And it's my honor. It's also an honor to have you all here. So first of all, Professor Wang will present their book for 15 to 20 minutes, and then each discussant will provide a response and dialogue with the author. So we will leave around 40 minutes at the end for Q&A from the audience. So let's get straight to introducing our author. Youru Wang received his PhD from the Religion Department at Temple University, USA. He's a professor in the Department of Philosophy and World Religion at Rowan University, USA. His specialized areas include philosophical interpretation of Chan Buddhist thought, Chinese Buddhist thought, and early Taoist thought, especially the Zhuangzi, and cross-cultural dialogue and comparisons between Chinese philosophy and religious thought and Western philosophy and theology. He has published 5 books, including Linguistic Strategies in Taoist, Zhuangzi, and Chan Buddhism, The Other Way of Speaking, with Routledge and Curson, Deconstruction and the Ethical in Asian Thought, with Routledge, Historical Dictionary of Chan Buddhism with Roman and Littlefield, Tao Companion to Chinese Buddhist Philosophy, and the book that will be discussed today, The Ethical Dimension of Forgetfulness. He is also a member of the editorial board for a Tao, a journal on comparative philosophy. So, Professor, feel free to start at any time.
Okay. So I have 15 minutes.
Yeah, 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes is
okay. I don't want to introduce. Is my voice clear enough? Okay, good.
Yeah, I can hear you well. Yes.
Maybe a little louder. I don't want to just very formally introduce the contents of book. So first 5 minutes, I may cover its broader range of this book. Then I want to share with other authors. Here are all scholars from bigger university. So with other authors, audiences about my experience with writing this book. So what caused me to be motivated to write this book? So maybe that's more interesting than just present a book, like use slides to give you contents for chapters. So at the beginning 5 minutes, I just briefly talk about this book's range. Then I want to talk about what inspired me, motivated me to write this book. So what are things most impressed me and give me motivation and my goals for writing this book? Probably whether those goals are reached or depending on our audience's feelings, opinions. So when it's close to 15 minutes, can Dr. Brecker reminded me time is almost over. So I have 10 chapters, this book, right? So except introduction and epilogue. Introduction, every book has introduction, so I don't have to particularly introduce my introduction. So it's just the normal. I want to mention that the epilogue is quite long, right? It was not placed in all 8 chapters because it seems more theoretical regarding all things about forgetting or memory or ethics. So basically answer 2 questions. One is there any possibility for happy forgetting? So in the sense to argue with Paul Ricoeur, because Paul Ricoeur at the end of his book, I'm also influenced by Paul Ricoeur's epilogue in his 2004 book, History, Memory, and Forgetting. So epilogue very long, and basically he put his discussion on forgetting in that epilogue part. So other scholars already criticized that, saying the imbalance you can see from my book. So many long chapters talking about memory issues, right? But your book involves forgetting. The forgetting only 50 pages, among more than 300 pages. It's just a tiny. So that's the imbalance of Ricoeur's view on that. But anyway, his book is influential, directly inspired my project. So that's the first question I argue with him. I believe Zhuangzi and in the West, Kierkegaard, somebody asked me whether philosophical writings can involve narrative. Yes. The 2 examples is Zhuangzi in the East and Kierkegaard in the West. both use parables to illustrate philosophical views. So I want to argue with Paul, even though he passed away 2 decades ago, by saying that, yes, they are happy forgetting. And based on the reason, because Paul Ricoeur said, in terms of Heidegger's existential concern, existential care. So if you are really careful person, you are caring with other people, right? You should not be just carefree, happy, forgetting. So I argue with that. Here I don't go to details. So the second question is about whether Taoist forgetfulness can be a virtue, because now virtue ethics is so popular, right? It is a more recent ethical approach, going back to Aristotle, and with new near-Aristotelian ethics. So I argue that's a very complicated issue. So my answer is very, you may say it's a slippery. I say yes, you can develop a Taoist theory of virtue, including forgetfulness. But in the context, Zhang doesn't want people treat forgetfulness as a virtue, just like a Confucian virtues. So a kind of anti-Confucian tone is there. That could be one reason they don't want to acknowledge it. That's virtue. 庄子是德 is currently translated as virtuosity. So I question and discuss that. I believe it's ambiguous, whether it's virtue or it's something different. But eventually I temporarily agree that it's better than directly translate the Chinese de into just the virtue. In Taoist sense, is better for virtuosity. So that's epilogue, I'm sorry. So inside book, 8 chapters, first about therapeutic forgetting. Second chapter is about what I call second area of his ethical investigation on pragmatic issues. But those pragmatic issues sounds like metaphysical issues. So that's very interesting. It's no longer for phenomenologist. Phenomenologist is no longer a metaphysical issue. So about personal identity in relation or troubled by time and otherness. So I pick up that thing, I think Zhang present a very similar angle to discuss. And for Taoist Zhang, it's more pragmatic, even though they also address metaphysical issues. So that's a second. First is psychotherapeutic or therapeutic forgetting, coming from argument with Freudian therapy basically is dealing with repressed memory. So that's pathological. It's not positive. So Freud himself addressed in several places about positive forgetting, but nobody pays attention. So overwhelmingly, his psychology is acknowledged as how to treat with people with mentally sickness. So here the difference. Then I move to Zhang's therapeutic forgetting. The second chapter I talk about personal identity basically focus on Zhang's no self view. So what does it mean by the text being no self or losing self, right? Then I relate it to relational autonomy issue and agency issue. That's a bigger part in my second chapter. Third chapter, I start to talk about what recur define as third area. First, therapeutic area, pathological. The second is pragmatic. Third is more sociopolitical, institutional area. So that's a bigger part and difficult part. The other parts is easy for Zhang because so many people already talk about it, right? Recently, I guess Dr. Zhang, if Dr. Zhang write a paper on politics and Zhang, she can address much better. But for me, I still limited my discuss with ethics. So I work very hard, figure for a long time how to write those chapters on social, institutional, political issue. So I still not formally address political issue, but for social institutional area of forgetting, I use almost 3 or 4 chapters to my surprise. So first chapter I talk about forgetting about Chinese 这样子是诚心 right? Privileged. I use privileged mind. Other scholars use other translation. So what are these privileged mind? And how Zhuangzi can be compared in chapter 3. I'm sorry, before chapter 1, chapter 2, I made some mistake. Chapter 1 is background information on Western achievement on study memory and forgetting. To forgetfulness. Almost at the same time, with several books, for Rick's book and a few books, focus on forgetting from European scholars. And in British American scholars, they focus on politics of forgetting. So I was inspired by these books because I think, as many of you will think, forgetting, that's our tradition. We discuss forgetting a lot for 1,000 years, right? But doesn't mean Western scholars never address forgetting issue. But for me, their problem is they privilege memory, remembrance over forgetting, until Nietzsche, for the first time, said, forgetting sometimes is liberating, right? It helps us to survive. If we always remember everything, how can our brain has room for new things? So that's astonishing, ever since Nietzsche started to say that. But even though Western philosophers still very much prefer memory. For example, Heidegger, right, in his Being and Time, talk about the forgetting of being, capitalized being, of existence, being, essence of existence. So forgetting is negative, right? Even though that's ontological, primordial, the forgetting is a condition of human existence. But finally, he implies that because of the diagram of our diagram of everyday living, also moving forward, also involves possibility to remember our essence of being, essence of existence. So still, memory is a key to save us from forgetting of beings. So I still put it in the whole tradition until recur. For recur, I also say the whole book, more than 2/3, deal with memory, and forgetting just very little. And that's one thing. For other thing is that we start to discover positive forgetting. It's not just the negative. So positive forgetting, Ricoeur also talk very little. So current Western scholars in politics forgetting, ethics forgetting, basically focus on negative moral issues. So that's different from our Eastern tradition, right? We see forgetfulness as very positive elements. So moving from that, the first chapter, I also discussed the ethical issue. So here, the conception of the ethical is much broader than normally we consider what is morality, right? So I follow both continental tradition from Heidegger, Derrida, Levinas, Ricoeur, and the two analytical philosophers, also Bernard Williams, and other virtue ethical scholars, and to more recently, Michael Slot. So they start moving from narrow morality to more broad ethical. So that's a good news to our scholars who study Taoism and Zhuangzi, because for Zhuangzi, many times scholars are frustrated how to make Zhuangzi fit into Western moral philosophy, because many Western categories do not seem not fit into Zhuangzi's discourse. Now everything's Western getting closer. So I'm telling my students, it's still very much hopeful. The postmodern contemporary Western philosophy move in a direction more closer to Eastern philosophy. So even my students ask, why? Why now almost every, and maybe that's exaggerating, why almost every big issues in Western philosophy currently exploring can be found an answer in Asian philosophy? That's really my students' question in my class. So other scholars say, no, something in Greek philosophy may be more close, right? But Western philosophy move in a totally different direction in modern time until now. So that's my first chapter. Then second chapter, therapeutic forgetting. Third chapter, pragmatic concern with otherness time and questioning self-identity. Then in number 4, chapter 4, I compare Taoist responsiveness with Levinas Derrida responsiveness. So I want to point out that in the book that very similarity. I'm glad Dr. Zhang mentioned that. But with difference is that for Levinas is that the ethical subjects, he acknowledged one place subjectivity, but the subjectivity can be aroused only by being surrendering to other. So ethical subject is like hostage to others. So that caused a lot of criticism. For me, I think the huge area he left out is the subjective capacity. Many Western philosophers criticize that should agent or subject prepare, focus on how to better respond to other people's sufferings issue.
Sorry, Professor, we have 5 more
Oh, okay.
minutes left. So
Right. Thank you. So that's the first chapter on socio-political institutional issues. Second, I move toward pragmatic use, the effect of forgetting privileged mind, then open Zhuangzi's philosophy to different uses of different right and wrongs, right? Harmonizing. I prefer the Pauline's new translation. It's not a way harmonize with different right and wrong. We use different right and wrongs to harmonize with others, right? So I explore that with contemporary discussion on equal variableness, whether it's relativism or not. Then I move on, still within that area with empathy issues, friendship issues, and the Zhang position between generalism, particularism. So it's a middleway position in Zhang's. So final 4 minutes, I will talk about that. The approach is semantic. So some chapters may look like I take a comparative approach. So comparative approach is just some elements of my book. I basically take a semantic approach in the sense that I focus on certain themes in relation to forgetting and ethics, but those things can be found in other Western philosophers. I will make use of it. I will read it, but I don't do comparison, neither comparison, which means like a two system. I compare Hegel, right, and Confucius or Aristotle, Confucius. Then each has its own system. I must address all issues. So that's not my approach. So I basically choose topics. Under these topics, how to address, how to discuss, how to argue, I make use of all kinds of material, including Zhuangzi and Chinese sources and Western sources, no matter it's continental or analytic. So the weakness is that since I refer to so many different philosophers. I said in my introduction, those grow up being trained in analytic philosophy tradition will be hugely dissatisfied with me because they believe you are very shallow, maybe you don't cover enough. And from phenomenologists, the continental philosopher, they will say, oh, okay, you know a little bit. That's a shortage. But I think I basically motivated by a recent move toward, at the end of memory study, toward forgetting. But we are at a very early stage. So I hope my book is just a precursor in this area, encouraging other scholars, younger scholars, do more concentrated study than me, than my approach look like it's elementary. So I should stop here. That's my introduction.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you. And thank you for the nuanced presentation and for also giving us insight into the driving questions behind the book. Now, let us move to our discussants. Before introducing them, let us clarify. Each one of them will have 10 minutes in total to ask questions, and then the author will have another 10 minutes to respond. So our first discussant is Professor Ellen Zhang. She's a professor emeritus from the Religion and Philosophy Department of Hong Kong Baptist University. She's now a professor in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at the University of Macau and research fellow of the Center for Applied Ethics at HKBU. Her research areas include Chinese philosophy, of Chinese and Comparative Philosophy of Medicine, and member of the editorial board of the Journal of Religious Ethics, the South China Quarterly, and Chinese Medical Ethics. So, Professor, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank 四海为学 and Paul for the invitation. Professor Wang and I have known each other, I think, more than 20 years, right? So I'm so glad that I have a chance to be here to talk about his book. And since it's a very comprehensive book, cover a lot of issues. So I just pick up a few things for tonight. Just earlier, in his introduction, Professor Wang mentioned the Kierkegaard. And there's a famous saying in Kierkegaard, which is state like that: life is a mystery to be lived, not a problem to be solved. I think that go very well with Zhang's kind of a philosophy, at least. However, today, I still want to insist to ask a practical question, whether Zhang's philosophy of forgetfulness can offer some kind of solution to the problem we are facing today in the contemporary world. Particularly, I am talking about using the cases, what happened in the US today. And so given that people with different views get so divided today, for example, in the United States, you see that, and there was a kind of demonstration last weekend, a No King demonstration, and also the case of assassination of Charlie Kirk. Maybe all of you heard of that, about that. So which badly hurts what is known as the recent public discourse. So given that, I was wondering if Zhuang's philosophy of forgetfulness could provide some sort of ethical suggestions in terms of humility, authenticity, and the tolerance of a difference to resolve the tension among people who view the world so differently. That is, in a sense, we say they are moral strangers, not moral friends. So what should we do? So to be more specific, can self-forgetting in Zhuangzi be used to address the political polarization and animosity due to the ideological opposition in the contemporary world? Or Zhuang's idea that allowing different things to be seen as equally valuable is called greatness. 大同同之谓大 is too idealistic or metaphysical for any kind of political philosophy to address the practical issue today. So that will be, so my points will focus on that. Personally, okay, maybe Professor Wang doesn't agree with me. Personally, I doubt Zhuangzi was promoting any kind of a rigid common morality or ethics. If there's any, maybe it's more negative than positive. The most important part in his ethics, as Wang has acknowledged, is called the value of accommodation, which entails first, maintaining relationship with people of different moral standards, and secondly, accommodating moral differences with others. And also try to collaborate, also with collaboration with the others. So that is to say that living with others is productive ways despite of mutual moral differences. However, in the context of a current political crisis, can a gesture of accommodation good enough to achieve common good or certain kind of general condition that I say maybe common good or something. Professor Wang used the term a good end. Something like people believe in a common end. So my question is, how can we prevent Zhuang's concept of equalization of all views or the notion of accommodation from falling into the trap that relativism, a kind of relativism in terms of equal value? How can we apply Zhuang's notion of the middle ground between particularism and generalism to ethical disagreement in reality? For Zhuangzi, a well-lived life is based upon an ethic of difference. Okay, a lot of scholars point out that. Therefore, Zhuangzi identified himself with those socially marginalized, as sort of marginalized other, from physically, deformed one, to some like socially marginalized personalities. But for Zhuangzi, they illustrate what he called the achievements of the Tao. So here, does this mean that Zhuangzi may endorse practice? Okay, I'm saying in that sense, does Zhuangzi also, the philosophy implied that he might endorse the practice of DEI, which means diversity, equity, and inclusiveness today. Yet from another perspective, Zhuangzi would be against any form of identity politics, which becomes so popular in US today. Since for Zhuangzi, identification with social conventions and groups are arbitrary, and that should be avoided. Another intriguing argument presented by Wang is the relation between the ethic of self-forgetting and the responsive to others. My question is how others are identified in the Zhuangzi. Jonathan Haidt, a well-known social psychologist, speaks of in-group loyalty within a community in which people share common values and that likely to relate it or to respond to one another. But how about in a situation today, like in Zhuangzi, talking about to be responsible to the others, the other is totally stranger. In the one chapter, Prof. Wang compare Levinas ethics with Zhuangzi, I have to be quick. Yeah, I don't think I can get everything now. So here, of course, in Levinas, there's a radical notion of authority. So I just wonder if Zhuangzi has a similar, really have the same kind of authority in his notion. And also back to this notion of Zhuangzi responsive to the others and through self-forgetting, probably I think does not really point to the ethical demand required by Levinas or later by Derrida for their idea of this notion of hospitality in which there's a total subversion between guest and host. So I'm just wondering if in Zhuangzi there is a notion of holy other. And also another question I want to ask is about this notion of, I have to jump something, okay. Maybe I want to ask the question about sympathy. Okay, my last question here related to Professor Wang's argument on the sympathetic capacity. As we know, sympathy is one of the concepts that often leads to the liberal-conservative political divides, as we see in the current debates about situation of the illegal immigration in the US. And empathy is generally understood as a capacity to share in the experiences or emotion that one comprehending others. In his book, Wang discussed the 4 types of empathy. Okay, I just, he talked about specifically what kind of empathy that, in Zhuangzi philosophy. But the question here is that upon this, Wang speaks about what he calls the other directness or patient-centeredness empathy to emphasize the idea that true empathy is responsive to others and not merely derived from one's own experience or emotion. This argument is quite similar. Okay, here, I think this argument is quite similar to Buddhist view of compassion. However, in Buddhism, compassion should be practiced together with wisdom as what known as the mindful compassion. Since a wrongly targeted empathy or compassion is not a good thing to do. I was wondering if Zhuangzi's empathetic feeling, 随感而应, and responding to the circumstances of time, okay, 应随其时 mentioned by Wang also requires a kind of wisdom in order to achieve the more effective sharing or corresponsive result In other words, if Zhuangzi pay due attention to the detail or situation of what to be forget or what to remember, if that's the case, then we can also say that Zhuangzi pay due attention to the detail of the situation when or how to practice sympathy. And so that do I have still time? Do I have
No, I
time?
think it's just about right. 10 minutes just
Okay,
passed.
I have
If
some
you have
other
any
probably.
other words to
Let me
wind up.
just yeah, I have some other, but probably I don't have time. And so my last question is, should the idea of nurturing an inner state of calm and ease in Zhuangzi or Taoism in general be promoted to any political leader today? For Zhuangzi, if empty oneself enables one to have a free wandering of the world, 虚己游世, does empty oneself also enable one to govern the world? 虚己以治世. So I just end up here. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I have 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
The first issue, I just follow your draft. It seems basically the same as what you wrote. Maybe a little bit different. First is relativism. Zhuangzi is not a relativism. I just give one very simple example. Relativism means right and wrong doesn't make sense. Okay, there's no right, no wrong. But the Zhuangzi say there is endless right and wrong. So forever right and wrong. But the endless, which means right and wrong are relativized. Right, so we go with the flow, which means we go with endless right, wrong. So this time we have something right, something wrong. But next time we change. We don't have attachment, fixation on right and wrong. So Zhuangzi's position here, I know my old friend Dr. Huang is preparing his book on patient-centered relativism. But in my book, I put in the notes. Actually, I disagree. He knows that. I say I no matter how much different relativism like patient-centered relativism, critical-centered relativism, various. I said no. The Zhuangzi, the spirit, central spirit, is not endorsing any ism. Yeah, probably you must say Zhuangzi maybe still have some isms, right? Maybe naturalism. The other things I don't think. So I said, I don't want to bury Zhuangzi's free spirit. Right? Zhuangzi does not want to endorse one particular thought. So here, relativism, I use Zhuangzi's notion, Ying Shi, right? 因名因为的因是名，这个因是 in English is one must circumstantially accepts, accommodates limited perspective for what they are, right? Which means under certain context, you have certain types of right and wrong. So Zhuangzi does not deny that. So that's my first answer to your question about relativism. Second, you mentioned about whether Zhuangzi is not interested in ethics. At least sometimes look negative, right? It's not just your view. The other scholars already addressed that. Zhuangzi, if there is ethics in Zhuangzi, that's negative ethics. But that has been for a long time. We can find normal ethics or positive ethics in Zhuangzi, at most negative. But now we start to discover, recently more scholars start to discover that like Dr. Zhang mentioned, his political views can be applied to contemporary politics, ethics. Many are very illustrating, right? Inspiring. For example, 不同同志之伟大, that's in middle outer chapters, right? Difference can be equalized. That's great. If there's no difference, all in commonality, that's not great. So yes, that's, you may say that's Chinese ethics characterize three traditions: Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, right? I think that's very good for many sinologists in the US. They all talk about that. But the US politicians just don't listen, because now political atmosphere is see China as the enemies. So who wants to learn something from China except some economy, maybe, in economics? So I think a better way, I follow Richard Rorty at the beginning of 20th century, 21st century. In some of his papers, talk about Western has too many dualisms, dichotomies, the Western philosophers' problems. So we don't need so many dualism, dichotomy. So here, can we question, even Levinas question, passivity, activity, negativity, positivity. But eventually, as scholars say, he still align himself with the side of otherness. But in his writing, he tried to make many points, say we should go beyond that, egoism, altruism. But here I suggest if we can go outside of those negative, positive, if you assign Zhang's ethical inquiry into negative, that will limit us. For example, now we start to think empathic attitude can also be found in Zhang's, right? And other empathy, sympathy, and many other views. It's mind opening. And mind opening, Dr. Zhang didn't mention altruism. The altruism, I save my answer to Dr. Yuan, because she, Dr. Li, I guess. She mentions altruism, I will respond together. So here I just jump from, skip that altruism issues. So maybe something looked negative, but eventually we'll find that it's positive meaning and effect for that. That's my tentative answer. And with otherness, that's a very good question. I want to say Dr. Zhang's short comments are very inspiring. A short paper with rich content, very inspiring to me. So here I just give some brief response. Here about otherness, for me, or from my book, I try to match the Zhangxing approach and the Levinasian approach. So other scholars may be even surprised or totally disagree. How can you compare Levinas with Zhang's, right? Not to mention altruism. Levinas refused to use altruism. But what he talked about is very close to altruism. The Zhang's didn't use altruism, but we have some elements. So here, otherness, I see two things. One is Levinas, the other, or otherness, right? Sometimes he uses alterity as difference. So otherness of others. This otherness is difference. But the Zhuangzi now is very clear by more than 1 or 2 or 3 philosophers, especially in the West, exploring this philosophy of going with the flow. What is Taoist Zhuangxin going with the flow? Going with the flow of differences, endless differences, endless changes, transformation. So I think here you can see some compatibility here between Zhuangzi and Levinas. So many people will say, no, you cannot compare them. Because in Zhuangzi, there is a oneness, right? So for oneness, secondary literature already addressed a lot. So it's not metaphysical oneness. Tao is not metaphysical oneness. It's a kind of, we get a perspective from the whole universe, the wholeness or oneness. But as you see from my book, the commentary tradition talk a lot by saying that you embrace two rather than one. It's very interesting. Our philosophical tradition basically ignore the commentary tradition, think they are under Marxist Cultural Revolution influence. Oh, they are just tautological, totally no creative. For those 1,000 years, the Chinese commentary, no time since a Chinese scholar already published a history of study of Zhuangzi, right? Zhuangxue, and also all materials organized in book. So I take a look. I find many things I want to address. These commentators already address. That's why I quote so much. That's something I want to promote.
I'm sorry, Professor. I think we can eventually come back if there's remaining time at the end, but
okay.
we've reached the
time is over. So I can stop here. I think a certain similarity, but difference is that Zhuangzi actually more close to Foucault, if you can question me. Focus on capacity of subject, while open the subjectivity to outside influence, to the others or otherness. But Levinas does not have it. Even though Levinas is profound, and his influence reached not just the philosophy, to psychology, psychotherapy, education, a lot of areas. So I don't know if I answer all questions. I can come back later.
Yeah, if there's remaining time, we can come back at the end.
Right. Sorry.
So thank you both. Thank you. We will move directly to our second discussant, which is Yuan, Professor Yuan, which is an associate professor of Chinese philosophy at Tsinghua University. Her research interests revolve around classical Chinese philosophy and comparative philosophy, in particular topics such as nonverbal communication, silence, laughter, rhetorical questions, luck and responsibility, acceptance and courage, and moral expertise. She is currently English editor and Chinese copy editor of International Studies on Confucianism, and she has co-edited works such as Preaching Logic Beyond Mohism and Tao Companion to the Philosophy of the Tao Te Ching. She's also published papers, among which we may name The Performance of Silence in Early China and Rhetorical Questions in the Tao Te Ching, Argument Construction, Dialogical Insertion, and Sentimental Expression. So, Professor, feel free to take the stage.
Thank you, Nicolò. And thank you, Paul, for hosting this event. And thank you, Professor Wang, to write up such an amazing book. This is a great chance for me to learn. Due to the limit of time, I'm going to read my notes. Professor Wang Youru's pioneering study of the cultivated forgetfulness in the Zhuangzi responds to the growing academic interest in forgetfulness as a counterpart to memory, perception, and understanding. Wang's book provides a first comprehensive reading of the vocabulary, reasoning, and meaning of a cultivated and positive form of forgetting. Taking an issue, or otherwise called thematic focused, rather than a purely comparative approach. Wang demonstrates a profound command of contemporary debates on forgetting and offers a systematic reconstruction of the Zhuangzi's philosophy in relation to modern contemporary discourses on forgetfulness. Rather than limiting his study to the habitual association of the Chinese term Wang, 忘记的忘, with forgetting, Wang draws attention to a wider range of expressions that reveal different ethical dimensions of forgetfulness in the Zhuangzi. This will include, for example, leaving behind fixed hearing and perception, 疑, not allowing preference or aversion to enter and do harm, 不入, fasting the heart mind, 心斋, placing things outside oneself, why, being without a sense of self, losing oneself, 无己 and 丧我, being devoid of a privileging mind, 无诚心, letting both alternatives of right and wrong proceed, 两行, adaptability to circumstances, 是 and attentive responsiveness, 应. All of these terms could be put under the umbrella term forgetting and be reconstructed in the Zhuangzi to converse a dialogue with existing Western discourses. I think this is really an approach that we can all practice more and learn from. Wang's reconstruction of the Zhuangzi's philosophy of forgetfulness as an active, creative, and ethical capacity, therefore establish a genuine dialogue between different traditions without privileging any existing assumptions on forgetting. Wang's book shows that a strong philosophical argument should be grounded in serious engagement with classical Chinese text, which includes commentaries, which are frequently overlooked for a long time, East and West. Wang observed that the vast body of commentaries on the Zhuangzi has been seen by modern scholars as uncreative, repetitive, or even tautological. Wang instead finds that many of the novel interpretations of the Zhuangzian passages our mind eagerly search for already exist in some trace in these commentarial publications. When referencing commentaries, Wang is clearly aware of the case that later commentaries were impacted by either Confucian or Buddhist ideologies and terminologies, which means that interpreters must distinguish external influences from authentic Zhuangzian insight. Therefore, when making use of the commentaries, the goal is not to reject these materials, but to identify possible distortions and to recover plausible readings even when they adopt or redefine vocabularies that did not originate in the Zhuangzi. I see Wang's proposal of what I call taking back commentaries to the Zhuangzi as an act of philosophizing commentaries. Wang's interpretation of asking and responding in the Zhuangzi serves as a vivid example. Developing from the commentaries of the Guoxiang, Chen Xuanying, Lin Xiyi, Xuan Ying, on the importance of 问, which in English means asking, calling, making a request, or demanding, Wang identifies the primary role of the person who 问, who asks, in the asking and responding relationship, which is different from our traditional understanding of taking the responder, the person who answers, as the central role in the relationship. The role reversal Wang identifies through philosophizing the commentaries, therefore shows that when treating the person who 问 as primary, it requires the responder to forget about oneself, forget about one's territory, interests, and situations. With forgetting, one can respond properly by taking into considerations the person who asks for help and the situations in which the person lives, thereby addressing the questioner's needs, interests, and concerns, which is something that current social epistemological discourse really focuses on. To me, Wang has made an important point beyond the Zhuangzian philosophy. This particular argument Wang proposed throws doubt on our common academic practice of treating sayings and answers as propositions rather than contextualized answers. Giving the primary role to the questioner, to the person who asks the question, we need to seriously rethink our habit of taking the so-called sagely answers from the Zhuangzi as the Zhuangzi's spokesman, who represent the so-called true Zhuangzian philosophy. Rather, we can entertain the possibility of a different contextualized answers, either as a joke, or as a sarcasm, or sometimes even as a self-negation. It is not the answer alone that gives us significant philosophical insight, but the process of asking and responding, the process of conversing, having a conversation, the whole packaging of how to communicate that the Chinese text provide is important here. This is the essential feature of the anecdotal philosophy, which differs from propositional argument, and it motivates us to expand the scope of what Chinese philosophical texts are. While learning about one's topic-centered reconstruction of forgetfulness through his careful textual analysis, I do want to discuss with one his reading of emotions in the process of cultivating forgetfulness. One argues that forgetting does not require the extermination of the current occurrences of emotions, but simply letting them go and preventing damage to the mind based on a profound awareness of the temporality of the emotions. I want to discuss and clarify the temporary nature of emotions and what it means to let go of emotion in relation to forgetting in this book. For one, emotions temporality means emotions simply come and go as situations change, as life moves on, as time passes by. If somebody who grows old with you, raise children with you, suddenly pass away, under one's reading, it is natural for somebody to feel deeply sorrow, cry because emotion's natural occurrence is granted. So long as that sorrow does not harm people. When being able to forget, for one, it means that one can also quickly recover as long as one moves on with his or her life when situations change. To make emotions temporary, the sadness once forgotten can be read as having disappeared. That's my interpretation based on Wang's argument. And the key to letting go of emotion for Wang is to minimize, marginalize, or suspend these impacts of emotion on one's mind. I disagree with this reading that emotions is simply momentary, which naturally occurs, but is intentionally let go when situations change as time passes by. The theory of emotions and forgetting, for me, costs too much in meaningful relationship one can have in one's life. It takes away any particular place one can still offer to somebody, since a cultivated forgetting person will no longer feel sad when one let go of the personal attachments and move on with his or her life. In return, it almost makes no difference for somebody crying for a broken toy from crying for a broken relationship, since after forgetting, one can no longer feel sad. Instead of relating forgetfulness to an emotion's temporary nature, I propose to understand forgetfulness as changing attention and directing one's focus. This means if your loved ones are dead and a special relationship is broken in life, to forget is to direct your attention away from how your life was broken, but how you can move on by attending to new relations, new life, and new understandings. The sadness most likely remain as strong as before, even when you think about that many years later, but you do not respond to it, react to it, and you do not focus on that. When reading forgetting as having temporary emotions, we do somehow face a bigger problem if we think about moral anger as a response to social injustice and moral violation, which is something in relation to Professor Ellen Zhang's comments. When somebody calls me, for example, 无知妇孺, an ignorant female, and I simply feel justified anger momentarily when being mistreated as a moral equal, it undermines the harm that unjust experience impose on people. I understand that letting go of my justified anger could prevent me from doing things out of proportion or saying things back that might equally lower my own moral standing. However, to make moral anger momentary also take away the very reason of being morally angry, which is to make people's unjust experience heard, to condemn the misbehavior, and to make long-term social change. So now if we think about forgetting as changing focus instead of utterly letting emotions go as time passes by and as situations change, then while giving a place to why emotions arise and to forget about one's morally justified anger can simply mean momentarily changing focus away from how one is mistreated and how moral norms are violated. The key to changing attention that differs from letting go of emotion lies in the fact that at any moment, so long as we still think back of our unjust experience, we ought to still feel moral anger because the mistreatment and the moral violation remain in the society. There are still a lot others I want to discuss with Professor Wang, but at this moment, I want to end with my strong gratitude that Professor Wang write up such a great book with a strong textual analysis building upon a new theory of forgetfulness in the Zhuangzi. So thank you again.
Thank you. Let me see. The emotion issue, I basically deal with in my chapter 2, the therapeutic forgetting. That's my focus in that chapter, which means Zhang forgetting involves forgetting of emotions. So use certain examples, for example, the Zhao story in 人间 right, in the middle of world, in the chapter. So Zhao is appointed to advise the emperor or duke, I all of a sudden forgot. So he worried about that. He went to consult Confucius, the pseudo Confucius. So that's Taoist sage. So Taoist sage said, yeah, if you don't go, that will problem. If you just give frank advice, you will also have a problem. So it seems no way to go. So finally, he said, forget about yourselves, right? Doing what is inevitable for you to do, which means love and duty. So I use that instance to argue with other commentators because they say whether in my book Zhuangzi look like Confucius. Yeah, I discussed that. I say here you can see Zhuangzi is focusing on not totally abandon the loving kindness, righteousness per se, not against the Renyi per se, but how to be more effective. Right? Renyi, the virtue of Renyi, that's Confucian, the theory. But Zhuangzi focus on different things. So back to here, the pseudo-Confucius advice the Zhao that you need, stay away, calm, stay away from your emotion. As you said, how to deal with emotion. You are not under, in my turn, you will not let emotion. The Zhuangzi identify 6 so-called 六情, right? So 6 emotions not dominate your mind, enter into your mind. I argue with Chris Fries. Yeah, he believed that when Zhangzi's wife died, the emotion enter into. So I say that's not the meaning of enter. Every sage has emotion. So English translation, something goes wrong by saying sage has no emotions. But actually Zhangzi reply that that is wrong. Sage has emotion, but the key is how to deal with it. Right? As Professor Yuan mentioned that you need to calm down. You will not just follow emotions. So I'm glad that you feel more detail with what is letting go. Yeah, emotion is not my major focus. I only in one chapter deal with. For me, I use not to try to marginalize your emotion. So emotion happen, that's natural. Human beings always have emotion. That's one. Second, according to textual materials, emotion is temporal because Zhang mentioned it's like a plant, like a season comes and go. So we have various emotions. So here indicating Zhuangzi consider the temporality nature of emotion. But you can argue that sometimes we have memory of emotion, right? Yes, but memory sometimes can also be changed, right? Memory sometimes is interpretation. So many times we have attachment to emotion, our memory will be different. If we let it go, memory will be eased, right? So consequences will be different. I basically agree with you that yes, how to deal with emotion, how to let go. One is redirect our direction, redirect our attention, or reorientate our heart and mind, not toward those emotions or my reaction under the influence of emotion, so-called being dominated, overwhelmed by those emotions, then we will be in trouble, right? So I'm glad to hear Professor Yuan mention that there could be something problematic with Zhang's philosophy of emotion. Recently, there are 2 or 3 books, A Philosophy of Emotion, right? And the Anthology on Emotion. In addition to 1994, Solomon's Anthology on Emotion, now we have 2, 3 more, including phenomenologists' publication on emotion. So I'm not expert in that, but I recommend those books now since we ever have more chance to study emotion. Emotion, in my chapter, I talk about emotion and value. So emotion is value latent. The judgment is related to 是非 and emotion. But sometimes they are different. You can distinguish them. So I totally agree. Reorient your heart and mind, your attention, not toward just those emotions. Like a 趾高 Confucius, you need to deal with it. You do your task, right? Not being worried because 趾高 worries so much. Oh my, being advisor to the emperor or what the prime minister, that's so difficult, right? So it risks my life. So I worry. So even before going to his job, he already become sick, mentally sick. So that's a problem, so-called emotional disturbance. You let it preoccupy. So your mind, suppose, is empty. So empty means empty of certain emotions. Yeah, but of course there are problematic people argue like a Professor Yuan, good memory, good emotion still has positive power, enable us to do certain things. And also if we all forget, then how can we deal with social injustice? Some people bully you, but at least at the moment, you let your emotion go. Then you can calm down yourself, start to think about it. I should raise the question rationally about bullying, about treating others in respect, right? So it's only free your mind to do better, rather than there are 2 consequences. One is that okay, I forget, so I don't fight. That's modern ethics, politics, or encourage people to think about that. But Zhuangzi didn't say much about it. Zhuangzi's point, like a Buddhist or sometimes Confucian, is changing your mind, your heart. Free yourself. So next time you can do something. Right? Is that important? I think that's important. So whether Zhuangzi give
Professor,
enough
I think we've
detail.
just reached the time limit.
Yeah, okay,
So
I can stop here.
okay.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. It
Yeah,
was super
welcome.
informative. Thank you. I think we just have to move to follow time. I will move to the third discussant, which is Luyao Li. She's a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at Beijing University. She earned her PhD in philosophy from Nanyang Technological University, and her research interests include Taoism, Neo-Taoism, comparative philosophy with a special focus on Zhuangzi and Guoxiang. She has published papers such as Responsive Harmony in the Zhuangzi and Harmonizing Virtuosities in the Zhuangzi, among others. The floor is yours. You can speak whenever you want.
Thank you, Nicolò, for your introduction, and thank you, Prof. Wang, for a very inspiring book and clear introduction today. I really learned a lot from it. I will also just reading my notes. Forgetting is a very important philosophical theme in the Zhuangzi, and Prof. Wang's book contributes to the discussion of forgetting in particular, and also expands on other philosophical issues in the Zhuangzi through this major motif. Additionally, this book engages in detailed comparisons with Western thinkers who also discuss forgetting. One of the driving forces in this work is the development of a less appreciated aspect of forgetting, namely the asymmetrical self-other relationship in forgetfulness. This asymmetrical perspective appears throughout the book, such as in the discussion of personal identity, social institutional dimensions, ethics, and friendship, and so on. My comments also mainly focus on this asymmetrical self-other relationship. The first thing I want to discuss is altruism. A behavior is normally described as altruistic when it is motivated by a desire to benefit someone other than oneself for other person's sake. In this book, Prof. Wang also quoted an explanation of altruism that it is contingent on relating to the other, not as a content of one's own consciousness, but rather as an ethical term that makes a claim on the self to engage in other regarding acts. Looking at this description, a desire to benefit others assumes a certain level of understanding both of the other and what might be good for them. Even if this might be defined as what they want, all those things which they think would be beneficial for themselves, this is still a type of understanding that many scholars might think the Zhuangzi does not promote. Such understanding itself is something that Zhuangzi is famously skeptical about, especially when applied to others' preferences or needs. If one cannot fully know other person's circumstances or their thought, then the possibility of altruistic action becomes problematic. Given the Zhuangzi skepticism towards such understanding, whether it will embrace altruism remains debatable. Furthermore, even when interacting with others is a way that appears centered on them, for instance, treating others as they would like to be treated, it remains debatable whether such behavior is genuinely for the sake of the other. Take the 3 in the morning story as an example. The monkey trainer adjusts the distribution of chestnuts to suit the monkey's preferences, giving them more in the morning and fewer in the evening. According to Wang, this is a key example from the Zhuangzi, as the monkey trainer accommodates the monkey's standard of value and revises or expands his own original standard. we might first note that this is not much of a concession on the part of the trainer. So his revision of his own original standard is not overly demanding. And while we might say that this pleases the monkeys, the trainer's real motivation is not necessarily the monkey's well-being, but also his own. He also achieves his goal of using the same number of chestnuts while also keeping the monkey's content, a goal that is arguably selfish. This illustrates that acting in accordance with other preferences does not necessarily mean acting for their benefit. Sometimes treating others in a way they want to be treated may serve as a different purpose. It could simply be a way to achieving a more effective communication or persuasion. Such persuasion or transformation of others may indeed result in benefits for themselves, but it could also just as well serve entirely different ends. Moreover, altruism is typically understood as an active stance. One actively seeks to benefit others. If a behavior is merely passive, even if it happens to produce beneficial outcomes for others, we do not usually call it altruism. And my second comment is about a symmetrical aspect of friendship. In the discussion of forgetfulness and friendship, Prof. Wang proposes that the Zhuangzi contains a critique of the self-same, which implies investigating others as similar to oneself. Wang suggests a model of asymmetrical love and friendliness, offering an alternative to symmetrical reciprocity. However, the depiction of friendship in the Zhuangzi, especially in chapter 6, Dazongshi presents a similar, slightly different picture. In this chapter, the worship, the transport, the plowshare, the come alone are described as friends. When these individuals look at one another and laugh, they feel a deep sense of concord, and thus they become friends. Their friendship is based on certain kind of sameness, or at least similarity. They share common attitudes towards life and death, which form the basis for their bond. And my third comment is about the topic of this book, forgetfulness. As the book discusses, forgetfulness is a central theme in the Zhuangzi. However, it is also worth noting that non-forgetfulness, 不忘, is also frequently mentioned throughout the text. For example, in chapter 5, 德充府, we find that's where the intrinsic virtuosities excel. The physical form is forgotten, but people are unable to forget the forgettable and instead forget the unforgettable. True forgetfulness. And there are other similar tests. In these passages, the specific objects of forgetting and not forgetting may differ, but they share a common idea. In certain situations, forgetting must be accompanied by some form of non-forgetting. This raises a question: what, according to the Zhuangzi, ought to be forgotten? Oh, we might ask, are there times when forgetting or forgetfulness are not important, but non-forgetfulness is? It would be more inspiring for if one could also include some more concentrating discussion on non-forgetfulness as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ying. First, I want to respond to altruism issues. I'm also involved in some debate with some other scholars not here, so about altruism. So it seems Zhuangzi is very much concerned with individual spiritual freedom, right, against the social oppression or discrimination. So why do you not connect Zhuangzi with altruism, right? So traditional definition with altruism is behavior, action. So did Zhuangzi give prescription on any human behavior? Very few. In outer chapter, there are some, and not to harm other people, right? And other ethical. But more relatively, Zhuangzi focused on some elements of altruism. So my book didn't claim Zhuangxin philosophy is a philosophy of altruism. I didn't say that. So actually, first scholar using altruistic elements in the Zhuangzi is Professor Youru Wang. Now is he moving to Fudan University from Hong Kong. He retired from Chinese University of Hong Kong. So I just use that altruistic element. So in 2 or 3 sense, I use altruistic element. First is that that's only one element in Zhuangzi's philosophy, right? Zhuangzi's philosophy is its content is so rich. What is called multifactorial, right? No, I'm sorry, multifactorial. So a multi-level layer meanings of tones and content, many times contradictory, not consistent, because it is anthology, an anthology of multiple authors. Right? Nobody can identify what is exactly John's the philosophy, right? Or his students, or his students of students, right? The British scholar Grant, S.C. Grant, separate, and Liu Xiaogan separate. But more recently, Western scholars argue in philology that the traditional separation of inner chapter, outer chapter, miscellaneous chapters are very much questionable. Many things they are already exist in the chapter without develop. They later on develop. Can you say it's we need to cut off because in the chapter didn't mention anything? Now about altruism in chapter 7, in the chapter talk about without selfishness. Right? I used it in my book. So go back to my point is that only one element. So my attitude, let's explore those elements we never address because like Cook, the Professor Cook, the 2 decades ago, he was authoritarian. He argued by Yuan Li, another scholar in Zhuangzi, saying that you interpret laws as altruistic. But at that time, he still refused that the Zhuangzi had anything to do with morality. That seems out of date. So my view is that apart, okay? I didn't say that's whole Zhuangzi. Second, what kind of altruism? Now in contemporary Western ethical inquiry, altruism is more than just a behave and action. As I used in my book somewhere, I quote from a scholar, Brown. In his book, he talked about that some other directed motivation. Because in Western ethical theory, moral psychology is so developed now. Right? But Chinese scholars still are catching up. Some other direct motivation, a regard for the well-being of others, the well-being of others for its own sake. That's called altruistic. So used implicitly, explicitly to refer to any such regard for others. Some restricted to a placing of interest in others ahead of those of oneself. The latter seems to correspond more to ordinary usage, while the former become definition of choice for many philosophers and psychologists. So if I follow Bernard Williams in his definition, he talk about that, just use that disposition. So Zhang's altruism also more close to contemporary ethicist approach. For example, let him be. Someone argued with me recently, I'm writing response, saying, let him be. Zhang's philosophy is let him be without interference, non-interference. But don't you think philosophy of letting be or non-interference has nothing to do with altruism? Altruism involves help regarding respect others for others' sake, right? So letting be is for others' sake. I don't want to interfere. Right? I don't want to impose my thought, my standard. So I let them be. Isn't it sounds altruistic? Even though Zhuangzi wrote very little about behavior, action. Right? That's a limitation. So it's a focus on how you transform your mind, changing your mind, changing your disposition. Actually, similar to modern Western virtual ethical approach. So that's the first one about altruism.
Okay, thank you for your response,
All
Professor.
the time. Okay.
Yeah, just to catch up on the time,
Oh,
because there
okay.
are a few minutes.
No problem.
We can switch up to the Q&A from the audience, but thank you all to the discussant and to the author for the discussions. We have around 27 minutes left for Q&A from the audience. You might write in chat or raise your hand with the Zoom button to let us know if you have any questions. So. In case, in the meantime, I can just ask one question, if I may. So I was thinking, how I was wondering, listening to the very insightful conversations, how the idea of yo from Xiao Yo Yo, that idea of yo can inform us sort of on this idea of forgetting. And I don't know if I'm wrong here to see this as related to altruism, as you were just talking about, but is this forgetting a sort of forgetting emotion? This yo as some sort of a becoming, which is also emotional. And I think about this because in terms of forgetting, because for example, I think of paintings from Song Dynasty, for example, from Guoxi, for example, for the Guoxi school, where we have this sort of fading of things, this ontological forgetting in a sense, things that fade into each other. And it made me think, for example, in chapter 4, where Zhuangzi speaks of qi, right? It speaks of qi as xu or dai wu zhi, right? And I thought, is this idea of dai wu, of qi, related to the idea of wu dai, of Zhuangzi, which could that be seen as a sort of forgetting that is also a becoming through the other? So what I was getting at is like, is this forgetting not just a forgetting that after you forget allows for a becoming, but it's a very forgetting that is framed through becoming. It's a forgetting that happens in becoming. So I was wondering this. And coming to the ethical dimension in this situation, if this encounter is not just with Wu, but also with Ren, right? How does this forgetting, if it's not just the subject, but it's both the all the members of the interaction, if this forgetting is sort of collective, let's say, how does this work in a sort of hermeneutic approach? If both horizons start to fade through forgetting, right? Is there some sort of creativity we can still speak about there? Some sort of creativity, both emotional or in terms of identity? So that was my question. I hope it's clear. It's a bit messy. I'm sorry for that.
Okay, good question. You give me more examples to discuss those abstract theories. Actually, when we talk about empathy or even forgetting, empathy is a word in English coming from German word originally, and early 20th century invented into English word empathy. So originally used by lips, the aesthetischen in German philosophy. So this talk about contemplating paintings. Look at the arts. Then you forget yourself. Even though 20th century Western scholars, I mentioned that, they refuse. In ethical areas, they refuse you can forget self-forgetfulness. So I argue with them because they believe that phenomenological difference is self-other for all ethical awareness behavior. Therefore, they don't allow. But in aesthetics, earlier than ethics, empathy was first being applied by lips. Probably Professor Zhang read Zhu Guangqian's Western history of Western aesthetics, so famous when we were young at the time. So that's the two become one. The Song Dynasty, sun and the mountain and the river. So I disappear into a faded. Remember, the fading is chapter 2. 赏我 losing myself when I'm meditating or realizing Tao. So it's kind of immersing, right? But the current Western scholarship on empathy refuse any immersing oneself into, because you are ethical agent. You still next, you have empathy towards somebody. He or she is crying, is sad, is suffering, right? So you need the action. Ethical needs the action. So you understand it, empathize yourself with it, totally understand. But the next, what is next? That's a professor's question on action in songs. The next, usually according to moral psychologists, a bunch of Western now doing that, is that you arise from empathy to empathic concern to sympathy. Then sympathy more close to altruism, compassion, loving kindness. But empathy, yeah, I'm teaching that to my students. So some students disagree that why empathy is so popular in Western philosophy, psychology, culture, ever since the 1990s, right? Early in Germany, in European philosophy, it's psychology a little bit. Not move to philosophy, not both continental and analytical. Tons of books on empathy, not to mention articles. So they ask me, what's the reason? Why Western start have a huge wave of empathy? Some are political reasons. Related European immigration issue, the stranger, should we have empathy with them? But the empathy has limitation of partiality. I'm more easy to be empathizing with my relative parents, children, close friends. It's so easy. But you ask me to empathize with a stranger, relatively difficult. So that's caused political issue when Bill Clinton in 1990s, for the first time talk about it. We feel your pain. And later Obama in early 21st also talk about it. And this may be a critical push toward academic focus on empathy. But a few people still against empathy, believing rationality is more important. I don't know if I answer your question. I actually agree with you. You try to grasp the sense. Yeah, but there is a woman philosopher called Judith I all of a sudden I forgot her name. Catholic nun published a book on empathy. The Edmund Husserl's student, because she was a Catholic nun, she basically dismissed by history of Western European philosophy until recently rediscovered that's a woman philosopher. And his book and early book, 1947, Max Schiller's Philosophy of Sympathy, is also talk about empathy. So she's the first one start using self-forgetfulness in refuting Lip's thinker. When you're contemplating a painting, the two become one, you totally disappear. Like a Zen Buddhist, contemplating the mountain river, you almost disappear. That Buddhist no self. But the Taoism has no self, right? But in ethics, how can we deal with it? My theory is temporary, phenomenologically blanketing your self-awareness, self-preference, emotion, judgment, value. You can temporarily. So I use Nietzsche's word to temporarily shut off the door from your mind. Therefore, your mind can be open, embracing something new. Yeah, sorry, back to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Is there any other questions? Okay. I have another student on the far end of this room. Wait, he has a question, one of my colleagues.
Hello, sorry, I'm a guest. Hello, I'm Miles. I'm also a student, a PhD student, studying here at ECNU in the field of Chinese philosophy. But my major back in London is actually early childhood education. And my research is concerned with applying Chinese philosophy in the field of early childhood education. Coming from an education perspective, obviously educators tend to privilege learning and remembering knowledge and certain skills. But from an early childhood perspective, we tend to view learning in a broader conception. So although in many early childhood settings, we focus on teaching and remembering certain skills, in certain curriculums in early childhood, they rather focus on cultivating children as learners. So cultivating what they call learning dispositions. Dispositions towards being a good learner later in their life or later in school. And so that might take the form of curiosity or resilience or confidence. So that form of education is sort of, instead of teaching specific skills, is teaching them, giving them experiences to develop those dispositions towards learning. And it's interesting hearing you talk about forgetting, because I know we're mainly concerned with the Zhuangzi, but I think of the Lao Tzu in chapter 48, in the pursuit of learning, every day something is gained, and in the pursuit of Tao, every day something is lost, right? And so although in the West we have these learning dispositions, is there such a thing as a Tao disposition? And if so, given all of the many positive forms of forgetting that Professor Wang has shared with us today, therapeutic, pragmatic, socio-political, can we facilitate a disposition towards forgetting in others? And if so, should we be teaching and facilitating that disposition towards forgetting in young children so that they can apply that throughout their life? And if so, how could we do that?
Thank you for your question. I guess current moral psychology, part of ethics, have some exploration in developmental psychology, but basically focus on adults. So here you talk about children. Of course, children needs memorize things. We teach them the manner of life, knowledge of life, and they are not mature enough. In the sense, their rationality is not fully developed. They are not fully rational. Therefore, when my friend Professor Huang, Yong Huang, talk about patient-centered, sometimes talk about adults. The children, you do things that other people would like you do to them. Those are only rational adults. Children, sometimes you need to teach children, as one of panelists talk about that. Professor Li mentioned that, you cannot everything follow children. They are rational, not fully developed, but you need to teach children how to be, right? So it seems only memory works. But I believe forgetting with a small part was still necessary. For example, one child in elementary school fighting with each other, right? Another child physically violent, right? Or take away your stuff, or you just quarrel by bullying. You feel it's not respect you, but you are depressed. The children also very unhappy. So how can a teacher advise these children? Of course, we need to do some justice job, to teach others you cannot do it. But for this victim, sometimes we need to also ask if students already apologize to you, as a teacher criticize you, can you let her go, right? You cannot forever remember this bad guy. I'm going to revenge. This is no good. So we still need to teach young children forgiveness. And forgiveness presuppose certain degree of forgetting. That will be my answer. Talk about adults. Recent scholarly secondary literature start talk about unlearning. That exactly fits the Taoist philosophy. Many times we learn from college or even PhD. We need to unlearn it in order to practice something. It's not that we just copy into our life. It's not so easy. Life is a reality. It's not just a copy from books or copy someone told you. You just do it. In that way, you deny the floating situations you face, every individual face. Therefore, we need also a lot of unlearning. So that's more easy in the Western society to accept that. But I don't know, even in Chinese society, how can we talk about unlearning? Actually, we can appeal to Taoism, Buddhism, right? You need to think about that. Yeah, here in New Jersey, we have like Buddhist, Zen Buddhist temple. So somebody grew up in Philadelphia and went to Japan, become a Buddhist monk, coming back, buy a whole house, publish popular books. And his house, I bring students there, is Zen Buddhist. He publicly tell my students, forget about your teacher, what your teacher teach you. Give me some hard time. See, when you graduate from school, from college, you face reality. You need to refill yourself with a lot of fresh things. So forget about what your professors say. Probably you find a lot of things they say wrong. It's similar to that. It's therefore we focus on inspiring students, teaching them critical thinking. It's not, just imposing all things, right? So it's passive here, passive learning. Here in United States, all campuses place emphasis on active learning. So push students to ask a question, because passive learning, you take notes, you fall into sleep, you recite, but how long you can memorize. But once you involve students, I ask students, you didn't ask a question. The whole class, if you don't ask, your class performance rate grade will be low. So you ask, you argue with professor, you have better memory. It will inspire you to be active learning. It's much more benefit, right? Yeah, I'm sorry, I talked for too long.
No,
So-
thank you so much. Thank you for your answer. Thank you for your time.
So if no other question, can I answer Professor Lee's question? I didn't finish.
Yeah, I think there's no questions. So yeah, feel free to we can wrap it up with this final reply you give. It's fine.
Oh,
We
so
have
how
8
many
minutes left. Around 8 minutes left.
Oh, okay. I will use 5 minutes.
It's fine. It's fine.
So for Professor Lee, I suppose answer about metaphors, polysemic metaphors, narratives. Yes, I talk about it, Kierkegaard and Zhang. So suppose I already mentioned that. About monkey trainer, since that's metaphor, its meaning is polysemic. So there are different interpretations. So here I present my interpretation about change. Actually, the author's point is clearly there, is that in Si, you just accept the situation. You don't have to stick with your principle. So I think it offers the opportunity to think the author how the Mongol trainer, how to be flexible. Even as you said, it's not overly demanding, it's easy, but that's a metaphor, a story. That's for one thing. Second, about the friends laughing, four friends become friends. The one thing is that the text material implies they totally agree in their hearts about their attitude, right? To not, stick with life, death, or say happiness, unhappiness. So they all agree. So we go with the flow. That's true. I don't deny that. Right? Even when I compare Derrida, Brescia, and Nietzsche with the Zhang's talk about forgetting. But the Zhang's forgetting has more meanings. When he talk about forgetting each other, many people don't know what it means. So I checked the huge exegetic tradition, find that they already offered. It's just modern people don't know that. Forgetting each other, some English translations use it as forget oneself. That's 相忘 means forget each other. You still explain as forgetting oneself. So you didn't answer the meaning. And the point is that postmodern conception of forgetfulness or friendship want to include something more negative than just a positive. For example, I use 3D, distance. Do friends need a distance, space? We talk about even married couple need to give space to each other. Even with young Chinese in China, they start to talk about give free space to each other. That's the best way to maintain marriage, not occupy each other's time 100%. So that's a distance. And so it's already include that, right? Another is difference. Right? So it's also involves all kinds of different, including disruption. Disruption of friendship is a condition of friendship. So that sounds a little more metaphysical, but ever since Nietzsche, Brescia, and Derrida all talk about, we try to theorizing friendship, try to make it more broad. We should consider the condition of friendship, and we should allow those negative things being addressed by our theory of friendship, not just positive things. Even Aristotle acknowledges that. Kant acknowledged that friendship is very difficult. And with modern times, the fast pace of our life, our living, make it easy. It's so easy to change a job or change a location. It's hard to keep a long-term friendship. So like the Levinas, Derrida, they only have time to say hello, that's it. Right? They keep a certain friendship, but it's not very close. So when you move to a new time, you find new friends. So sometimes we forget each other in the sense that we don't artificially, intentionally be friends. Have you ever thought you want somebody to be your friend? It may not work. Right? I want this boyfriend be with me, but this boyfriend, it's not my intention can solve that. Right? So sometimes you need to let go. So forgetting, but also why friends don't see each other. Like me and Dr. Zhang, we don't see each other, don't talk for long. But our nice living behavior still have influence toward each other in our memories. That's what commentary literature talk about that. So forgetting each other means 畏无为. Right? 相与为, talk about like something, I forgot the Chinese words. Because here I don't teach in Chinese, or teach in English. So it's using 无为, no mind. You not deliberately keep a friendship. And sometimes, of course, you need that, but you rely on it sometimes. It's natural. Right? Therefore, Derrida go back to natural philosophy. But I question that Zhang is really naturalistic philosophy, but not Derrida. Derrida has a good beginning to do because Derrida is more pessimistic. Yeah, someone argued with me, my friend, Professor Tao Jiang in Rutgers University, argued with me that his book describe Zhang is very much focused on individual freedom, freedom from political oppression, imposition. But don't forget the happy wandering, 逍遥游. The you many times is wandering, like Nietzsche's wandering. It many times cannot be totally intentional. Right? It's your life goal, your life journey is wandering. So go with the flow. How can you be always intentional? Right? So effortless effort. So that's something tricky. Sorry. So I will say to Professor Zhang, it can be applied to contemporary situation. Western need to learn more from Eastern philosophy, Asian philosophy. For example, 不同同志之伟大. When every time, of course, that's a governmental issue. When Chinese leader government talk about it to Western media, they don't want to listen because they think, oh, no, I stop talking about it. So, but as academic study, we can explore the meaning of those things, benefit to the whole world, not just the Chinese. Actually, those Taoism, Buddhist, Confucian tradition, even not all Chinese follow them, not to mention Westerners, right? Not everybody nicely follow our traditions and need apply traditional view into current situation. Is not just a copy. Yes,
Professor, I think
sure.
we have to just wrap it up just for time. I'm really sorry to interrupt. But yeah, we've just reached the mark, and thank you so much. Thank you, really. Thank you so much, and thanks
Yeah,
to
I want
everybody.
to thank you and Paul for organizing, chairing, and introducing me, and thank all three participants. Spend your time, energy to involve in this commentary. I learned many things from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.